a super neighborhood self-generated transportation plan back in 2010 that identified Patterson as a priority bicycle connection. Again, in 2013, the Washington Avenue Livable Center study also codified this. In 2017, when there was an update to Houston's bicycle master plan, Patterson was naturally on the bike plan, but it was listed in the highest priority category, which are short-term retrofit projects. These are projects that we think are high priorities for connectivity and can be implemented relatively easily. And then again in 2018, this is not the entire quarter, but the intersection at Washington and Patterson. In the summer of 2018, Mayor Turner commissioned the city departments to look at the most dangerous intersections in the city to see what could be done to improve safety and comfort in those locations. And Washington and Patterson was selected as one of them. So later in 2018, early 2019, a multidisciplinary team of state, federal, local, and advocacy group transportation experts took a look at Washington and Patterson to see what could be done there. A little bit about the public engagement that the planning department has done on this project. We had our first meeting for the project in earnest in November 2018. That was at the Council on Recovery. I'm sure many in attendance tonight were also at that meeting. We then had a series of meetings directly with the West End Civic Club, first in February 2019 and then again in May of 2019, where we talked a little more about the specifics of the project between Washington Ave and White Oak Bayou. We met again in June of 2019 with the Magnolia Grove Civic Club to gather feedback on the proposal. And then again, in January 2020, we had a pop-up bike lane event on Jackson Hill at the intersection with Scotland at the entrance to Buffalo Bayou Park, where we had a lot of attendees and gathered a lot of feedback and had folks actually able to test out the design for that intersection and for Jackson Hill Street. So we've had quite a few touch points so far, but we have more news to share tonight. A little bit about the project in general. This project aims to create a safe bicycle connection from the White Oak Bayou Greenway at the north, across I-10, through the West End neighborhood, across Washington Ave, and then down through the Magnolia Grove neighborhood, east-west via Blossom over to Jackson Hill, and then down Jackson Hill to the intersection of Scotland Street and the pedestrian bridge to Buffalo Bayou Park. Not only will this project create a safe and comfortable connection over a number of barriers like Washington Ave and I-10, but it'll also connect you to our emerging Bayou Greenways network. And you can see on this map right here, all of the new or future connections that you'll be able to make immediately from this bikeway. And then here's just a larger view of the bikeways in Houston, either existing, recently constructed, or on the books to be constructed in the next few years. Within the red circle is the Patterson Bikeway, but from there you can see a great number of places within the inner loop and beyond that you'd be able to connect to safely on your bicycle when this project is complete. So we're going to go north to south, talking about the different pieces of the project. There's a few different streets, a few different intersections, and there's some sort of varied terrain. So there's various different treatments depending on where along the project we are. So on Patterson Street, from White Oak Bayou to Washington Ave, it's an existing roughly 36-foot, sometimes wider, sometimes narrower, especially over I-10, but this is generally the cross section that you're looking at. With parking on either side, our proposal is to make this a neighborhood shared street, to put in striping and signage to better communicate to folks that this is a shared environment between vehicles, cars, and pedestrians, and to get people to get car traffic, especially to slow down, make cyclists a little bit more predictable, and otherwise make the street safer. This is not the only means by which we hope to make Patterson a more comfortable environment for everybody. We have a few other more specific treatments for this stretch that should hopefully, in addition to the pavement markings and the signage, make this a safer neighborhood street. So first, at the intersection of Patterson and I-10, particularly the eastbound frontage road on the south side of the freeway, we're proposing a short stretch of bike lane, about 100 feet, northbound in advance of the feeder road to allow vehicles and bikes to separate out. And then once at the intersection, for cyclists to have a little bit of a lead on the cars. So when it becomes their turn to cross, they're more visible to vehicles and they get first dibs at getting across over to the bridge. Part and parcel of this treatment is also a no right turn on red treatment at this intersection. At present, there's sort of a steady stream of cars taking a right from Patterson north to I-10 east. Either it's a green light or rights on red are permitted. And it really makes it difficult for cyclists to sort of catch a break as they're coming across. So this will request that all drivers stop until there's a green light, allowing cyclists to get a lead on the intersection and go across the bridge back into a shared environment. That's a pretty narrow bridge. It's not really wide enough for a bike lane, but we think that this bike lane in advance of the intersection will make that experience a lot safer. And here's an example of what a bike lane looks like in the wild. This isn't in Houston, but you can get the idea here of how cyclists are much more visible at intersections with this sort of treatment. Moving down, this is at the intersection of Inker to the west and Marina to the east. We're proposing a traffic safety island at this intersection to slow vehicles down. This is sort of a tricky intersection. There are a fair amount of driveways, and then also on Inker to the south, or Inker on the east side of the street of the Inker intersection, and on the west side of the street of Marina intersection, it's really one intersection, and people, according to Texas state law, folks should not be parking there to begin with. So this is meant to better clarify what existing state law is around parking near intersections, and also to have drivers slow down by moving a little bit into the other lane. This is in traffic speak called a chicane, and it sort of interrupts this long straightaway that you have from I-10 down to Washington, and better communicates to drivers that they're now in a slower, more local street environment. Here's an example of what one of these things looks like in the wild. This is not in Houston. We don't exactly know what this one is going to look like yet in terms of materials, but this is meant to give you a sense of what that treatment looks like. A little farther down, this is Patterson at its Maxey Street to the west and Kohler Street to the east. It's also right at West End Park. We heard quite a bit from the neighborhood that this is a rather dangerous intersection with pretty poor visibility, that people come speeding down Patterson, and if you're exiting from Kohler or Maxey onto Patterson, that you don't have great visibility and that the cars are often moving relatively fast. So our proposal here is to make this intersection an all-way stop. So no matter what street you're on, you'll have to stop, look around, and then only move once it's safe to proceed. We're also proposing some daylighting at this intersection. So in the 30 feet or so from the intersection where it is legal to park, we're simply just going to stripe that out and also use some physical obstruction to better communicate to folks that that's not a legal place to park, and to establish a visibility triangle at those intersections. Here's an example that actually is in Houston. This is at Calumet Street and La Branch in the Museum District, of what a daylighting at an all-way stop looks like. So it would probably look a little similar to this. We're still working out the details, but this is meant to give you the idea. Moving on down to the intersection at Washington and Patterson, and now actually south is at the top of this image. This is the intersection that we heard quite a lot about in the Safer Streets initiative. This is the intersection that was evaluated by that multidisciplinary team of road safety experts. And the solution that they came up with was a median refuge island. At present, people walking and on bikes have to wait for a break of traffic in both directions and then cross 5 lanes. What this treatment would do would allow folks to cross one lane, one direction at a time, and only to cross 2. So it's a much shorter crossing distance in each of those, and to give them a space to wait in the meantime. This is sort of the deluxe treatment of the median closure, of the range of median closures. Some of them allow for left turn movements across the main street. We're really going for the deluxe treatment here, which we think is quite a bit safer. At present, folks can make a left off of Washington onto Patterson, and folks going down Patterson can either go straight or make a left. This would basically restrict all vehicle movements at this intersection to right turns. And we think that this makes things a lot safer for all road users in this location. This is at a sort of bend in Washington, so there's not great visibility for folks who are waiting to make a left turn. The speeding traffic can't often see them. It gives more space for those waiting. And we also believe that this will reduce the cut-through traffic through the West End and Magnolia Grove quite a bit. Patterson connects to I-10, so there's a lot of regional traffic that uses Patterson to get to Washington and then to get to other destinations. We really think that that traffic belongs in Shepherd Durham or on Yale or Heights. And by restricting the farther movements through this intersection, will really encourage people to be using the major thoroughfares instead, which should reduce on the cut-through traffic in the neighborhood, which we heard quite a bit about, and also make this a safer and more comfortable street for shared purposes. And here's an example in Houston of what this treatment looks like. This is at Alabama and Hutchins Street in the 3rd Ward. You may have visited this. If you haven't, I encourage you to check it out because it will look relatively similar to this. Moving on down to Patterson Street south of Washington and Blossom Street between Patterson and Jackson Hill Street. This is a relatively narrow street. It's about 20 feet paving, often with open ditch. Folks are driving relatively slowly on these streets to begin with. They're very much neighborhood streets, so we're just trying to encourage that a little bit more with the shared lane markings and the signage. Next is the intersection of Blossom and Jackson Hill. So this is where folks will be transitioning from Blossom onto Jackson Hill and vice versa. This is currently just a one-way stop for, or one direction stop from Blossom, and Jackson Hill can move through here. We're proposing an all-way stop at this intersection to make all users slow down, take a look, see who else is there, and then proceed when safe. We're also proposing a bike box on Jackson Hill going northbound, transitioning onto Blossom. This will allow folks to get out of the bike lane that we have proposed for Jackson Hill, get a lead on the cars at the all-way stop, and then transition onto Blossom Street. Moving on down to Jackson Hill Street, this is between Blossom and Scotland Street down by Buffalo Bayou Park. This is an existing street that's about 36 feet paving section with 2 drive lanes and parking on either side. What we're proposing is bike lanes on either side, repurposing the parking lanes that are physically separated with some sort of physical delineator. Jackson Hill has a lot of cut-through traffic that comes off of Memorial Drive, and we think that the safest treatment for Jackson Hill Street are the dedicated bike lanes on either side. This also transitions well into what we have proposed for. Oh, excuse me. Let's get that out of the way. The treatment that we have proposed for the intersection of Jackson Hill and Scotland is what's called a protected intersection, where the bike lane movements are moved to all 4 sides of the intersection, more like the crosswalks, and then have cyclists cross side at a time. Protected intersections really work best with bike lanes on the approaches, so that's why we think that bike lanes on Jackson Hill, which will be the major bike route through this area, are especially important in conjunction with this treatment. This treatment will also allow cyclists to move onto Scotland Street from Buffalo Bayou Park if that's what they choose, but that will not be the primary bike route through the neighborhood, so those bike lanes only extend for a short bit out of the intersection. So just a snapshot of where we've been so far. Like I mentioned previously, our first engagement for this project was in winter of 2018. For the past few months, roughly fall of 2020 until now, we have been working on these design drawings that I've been showing tonight. With the feedback that we get tonight, we will further refine them, and we hope for construction to begin sometime in late spring or summer of 2021. that is the presentation. Feel free to either use the raise hand feature in Microsoft Teams or to submit your questions via the chat. We'll also be answering questions that way.
Do you want me to call on people?
Yes, that would be great.
Got it. Frank Kregeler?
Hey, you pronounced it right. Most people,
right.
Well done. The one thing that may not fall in the scope of this project, may not fall in your scope, Peter, is the pedestrian bridge that goes over Memorial Drive. You stopped short of that in your presentation. And so if it's out of scope, it's out of scope. But one of the most frustrating things as a cyclist is going over that bridge. It's a pedestrian bridge. It's very narrow. Is there any plans that you know of to widen that to make it more cycling friendly?
Thanks, Frank. Yes, we have heard concerns around the bridge quite a bit through this project. You guessed correctly that it's unfortunately not within our scope. Our scope is strictly limited to city streets and more short-term items like paint and physical delineation. Reconstructing the bridge is by many factors or many orders of magnitude the budget for this project. So unfortunately, we won't be revisiting it here. But this engagement process has generated a lot of feedback about the bridge. So I suppose that that's the first step.
Can you just, a follow-up question, can you just, who's in charge of that project, or under whose scope does that fall?
I'm going to defer to David or Ian on that, but my best guess is that that bridge is owned by the Parks and Recreation Department.
That was my guess. Is that what you think?
That's what I think.
That's probably the problem. It's like, maybe nobody really knows who takes ownership of that bridge, huh?
I think it's less of an ownership problem. I think we all we all use that bridge, and we know its deficiencies from the terms of the width, and it's just a capital improvement project. I think the best bet would probably be a Buffalo Bike partnership, or one of our big partner organizations who are really doing a lot of envisioning. It's going to take some money to really build that bridge right, but we will make a note of it for sure, and I promise you we're well aware of it, just as personal users ourselves.
Great, thank you.
Next speaker, it just says Tom. I don't see a last name, but your hand is raised.
Thanks, Dave. This is Tom Compson. I was just curious about the stretch along Blossom. I don't ride that part of Blossom because I usually go on Scotland along this route. So I was just wondering if you could show a little bit of what the plans are along that.
Sure, I'll go back to that portion of the presentation. On the top right here, you see the existing cross section, and the bottom is lane-wise the same with shared lane markings. There'll also be some bike route signage through here.
Okay, thank you.
I think are we going to do some daylighting as well at those intersections? There might be some minor pavement marking work we do too. Yeah, but I think, Tom, I think it's going to be a pretty simple. Really, that part of Blossom, I think, is very low traffic. And really what we're doing here is you have a lot of pretty good streets through here. And really we just have a couple blocks where we're trying to connect. So we're giving kind of one recommended route, and we'll make it as safe as we can, but really we think it's pretty good, and you might have other options as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And the other thing, the intersection there at Scotland, I may have missed it, but was the plan to turn that into a four-way stop?
Yes, that's correct. This will be a protected intersection for folks walking and biking, and an always stop for vehicles.
Great, thank you.
And I think I'll start to kind of alternate between people's hands raised and questions in the chat.
Sure.
So the first one is the connection to the Heights bike path north of I-10 already done?
So could I ask whoever asked that question to elaborate which portion of the Heights bike path? Are you referring to this Rutland Ped bike bridge that's right there?
That's Andrew Munoz.
Yeah, I was referring to like the part that connects Patterson to the bike path, I guess. At the is that the Rutland Bridge? Is that what that is? Wherever it connects into like the main path, into the White Oak Trail and all that.
Oh, so it at present connects directly into the White Oak Trail right there. You can ride Patterson directly to the White Oak Trail today. So this project aims to just generally make Patterson a more comfortable street to ride there, but that connection is already open.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll go back to hands being raised. Claire?
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation tonight. My question is off topic, but if you don't know, I would like to propose for a future meeting, what's going on with this Houston Harmonium District over in Magnolia Grove, where they have several blocks that are, it looks like they're either going to close off or make a like nature district or something. Do you know anything about that?
I got to say that's the first I'm hearing about that, but I'm happy to look into it for you.
That would be great. I've seen these signs for a while, and I have not had the chance to Google them. But now that I'm talking to you about it, it's like it's a Houston, definitely a Houston district change type notice, but the public notice thing that, this district is going to be a blah, blah, blah. And it's something about Houston Harmonium District, nature or something or other. But it's several blocks over here in Magnolia Grove off of west of Patterson. So it's like Parker and Gibson down in that area. And there's already some stuff over there that's kind of that nature. So if you could put that on your radar for a future meeting, I'd really appreciate it.
It's on my radar now. Thank you, Claire. That sounds really interesting. I'm surprised that we are not familiar with it, but I'm wondering if there's another name for it.
I don't know. Come take a walk. Give me a call. I walk by it pretty much every day with my dog.
Thank you.
There's a comment in the chat that the Harmonium District is a small section of Magnolia Grove that is a proposed historic district.
This is Mike Van Dusen. That's correct. I think an application has been made. I'm not quite sure where they're at in the processing, but it's being done. There's one person that owns a lot of the property there, which is why some of the street fronts, so to speak, look the way they do. But that woman has made application for a historic district.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question in the chat is, how soon can I expect the presentation to be posted on the project website, webpage? We're pretty good at it these days.
You probably get that out by tomorrow at noon.
Okay.
Hopefully so.
Then back to hands raised. Robert Garachik.
Yes, thank you. My question is the Blossom piece of the bike trail. Is that fixed to Blossom? I remember there was talk about using maybe another street, Fagan or Dixon. Are we tied down to Blossom now?
So the current proposal is to use Blossom. You're correct that at first we were looking at using Fagan. We were going off of what was on the bike plan, and Fagan was the closest east-west street from the Jackson Hill Bridge. And then we looked a little further and we found that the traffic volumes on Fagan are quite a bit higher than they are on Blossom. We also heard some feedback from Magnolia Grove residents that they would feel much more comfortable riding on Blossom than they would on Fagan. And that's the reason for that change.
Thank you.
Okay, and we were asked to put the project webpage in the chat. I just put it there.
Yes.
Have you considered raised crosswalks at neighborhood intersections that are getting, quote, special treatment?
We have not thought about raised crosswalks yet for this project. As the design's relatively far along at this point, I cannot guarantee that we can add those in, but it's definitely something that Ian and David and I can talk about.
We can look at it. What I would caution there is that when we had the funding set aside for this, it was really meant for just pavement markings and signage. We've kind of push the limits on what we can spend it on. But I think the main thing right now is we're trying to impact as many streets around the city as possible. And when you talk about that kind of level of infrastructure change, it might be a bit more costly. So I think it's a good idea. I love them, and I want to see more of them built. But we might not be able to do it with this pot of money.
Okay, next, hand raised, Howard Watson.
Hello, Peter. Thank you for the presentation. My question was regarding right there at Kohler and Patterson. You said it's going to be a mandatory. Is that a four-way stop?
Yes, we are proposing it to be a four-way stop on both Patterson, Kohler, and Maxey.
Okay, great. I've been trying to get a light there, but I guess we have to settle for the stop signs. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next in the chat. For over 10 years, I've lived in Magnolia Grove and taken Patterson up to I-10. Most days I will purposely go out of my way to avoid the Patterson-Washington intersection. I'm very glad to see the proposed changes at that intersection. Thank you. I probably should have realized it wasn't a question, but thank you for saying that. I'll do one more from the chat. Could you please go back to the slide with Patterson and Washington?
Sure thing.
And this is Mark Cosierra.
Yeah, hi there. I just wanted to see that a little bit in a little bit more detail as you went through the slides fairly quickly.
As you see it, did you have a question on that?
No, I didn't. I actually don't have a question. I guess, well, maybe I do. The only bike approach there seems to be from the north. That green.
Sure, I can elaborate right there. So Patterson north of Washington is substantially, maybe twice as wide as Patterson south of the intersection. We believe in that wider stretch that we can offer a short stretch of bike lane, this time on the left hand of the driver, to position people to that median opening for cyclists and to separate out that conflict before the intersection. On the approach south of Washington, so if you're traveling north on Patterson to Washington Ave from the south, that's a much narrower street right there. So we don't think that we're able to provide a dedicated bike lane in that space. In that area, the cross section would look much more similar to the rest of Patterson and Blossom south of Washington.
And Pete, just to emphasize, that's a very short segment of bike lane.
Yes.
That's really just approaching the intersection to help bikes get into a position to be able to cross safely. And we looked at carrying it as far back. I think we'll try to carry it as far back as possible. But at a certain point, you lose some of the benefit because you have a lot of driveways on each side of the street. So, I think that's not typically where you expect a bike rider to be, in the middle of the street necessarily. And so that's what we're trying to say. Here is kind of a special case. We want you there because all the cars that you're going to be conflicted with are going to be taking a right turn. So let's separate out the right turn movement from the bike movement, and that'll position you too for the gap in the median.
Oh, excellent. Okay, now I understand. And can I assume that there'll be stop signs north and south and no special reason to slow down east and west?
There will be signage that you're approaching a high visibility crosswalk. There'll be signage that tells you to yield for pedestrians and cyclists in the crosswalk, but there will not be a stop sign along Washington.
Yeah, won't be a stop sign. We'll be using yield ahead. I'll get a little bit of echo, but we'll be using some extra pavement markings and signage that really should help there, and we'll see how that works.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, back to the hands raised. Howard Watson.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Great. In the chat, there is a little more discussion about the Harmonium district. That's kind of a side conversation, so I'll let people read that for people who would like to be involved. There's an email address for people who would like to participate in that. So we'll go back to the hands raised. Mary Chance.
Hi guys. I currently operate like a library on wheels, trying to get from Hogg Middle School way over in the Heights all the way to Nellie Keys Park. So I'm interested in your ETA on the Rutland overpass, pedestrian bike bridge. You may have mentioned it, but I didn't catch like the date.
Sure. So that project is not a City of Houston project. We are not designing or constructing it. So I don't really know on the timeline on that. I know that it's something that TxDOT has proposed. I believe that TxDOT owns this area just to the left of the dash line as a detention basin, and they proposed to do a bike trail along there. But I don't know the status of that ped bike bridge.
Okay. Thank you.
We can check on that. Pete, I think you're right. I think TxDOT, did they submit a grant application there a year or two ago?
That's correct.
We should probably get an update on that and see if they got it or not. I'd love to know.
Right. Good point.
Thank you.
And Mike Van Dusen does say in the chat, Rutland is a TxDOT project that doesn't fund for about 2 years. We appreciate the insight. Thank you. Now in the hands raised, we'll go to John Bush.
Hi. I guess I have 2 questions. The first one was just following up on that Patterson and Washington intersection. Will there be any type of like a pedestrian crossing signal similar to what's at like Yale and the MKT trail?
So at this time, we are not proposing a traffic signal at this location. We think that the median closure is a good first step. And I can say that this treatment is very much compatible with the traffic signal if we decide to install one down the road. It's not one or the other, and we're not precluding that. But within the scope of this project, the median closure is what we're proposing.
Okay, and then the other question I had at the Patterson and I-10 feeder intersection, will there be like a separate traffic signal for cyclists similar to what you see at the Lamar Street bike lane through downtown?
I'm not sure we'll have a separate signal head for cyclists. Ian, you have?
Yeah, we're not going to be able to hear really where we're using those dedicated signal heads right now, or where our specific. We emphasize them more on our two-way bike lanes, where you'll have people on bikes moving both directions on one side of the road. That's not typically where you expect a bike to be necessarily at an intersection. And they also can't see the signal head, so we have to provide them a signal head when they're moving in that direction. For here, this will just be using the existing signal system. But what it'll allow bikes to do is that when the signal's red, they will be able to basically sneak up. If there's a queue of cars, they'll be able to sneak up around them and get in front of them and safely wait in a very visible way. So when the light changes, they will have, like Pete said, kind of a bit of a head start. So it gets some of that benefit of a bike-only signal just by using the pavement markings.
Okay, thank you.
And sneak up on is a technical term. Claire?
Okay, again, off topic, but I'm wondering what is up with that church that's for sale on Patterson, that's just south of I-10 on the west side of the street. I think it's St. Mark's or St. Paul's Methodist. I don't remember exactly, but I passed it. It's like it's a big parcel of land, and I'm wondering if y'all know what's going on with that.
I apologize, I don't know.
I don't know. That seems like a question that somebody, if they're in the audience, might be able to type something in the chat if they know. But
yeah, I've tried to search it on Google. I've tried to Google real estate sites and commercial real estate sites to see what's going on with that. And I have the for sale sign. I see the for sale sign there, but I have not been able to find any information on that. I'm just curious if that's going to be like a big ass high rise or something, something. If anybody knows, it'd be great to know. Thank you.
And there's a question in the chat. This may be following up on that church question. Where was the land? Walker Shores, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear again what part of the land you were talking about.
Okay.
Oh, it's on Patterson, on the west side of Patterson, just south of I-10. I don't remember the cross street, but I think it's north of the West End Park on the west side of the street.
Anybody has any information, they can put it in the chat. That'd be great. We'll go back to the hands. Lisa Maranto.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay. On Blossom, because there are no stop signs, or very few stop signs between Memorial Park and Jackson Hill, it's used a lot by cyclists and runners going east-west. And it's also because there aren't any stop signs, you can see a pretty good issue with cars going pretty fast along there. And in particular at that Patterson Blossom intersection, there's a spot where cars bottom out if they're going too fast. My concern is with cyclists moving from Patterson to Blossom and vice versa, that they're going to be exposed to some pretty fast moving traffic there unless there's something done to slow the traffic down. More so than just signage. And we in Magnolia Grove, we've discussed requesting speed bumps along Blossom in this precise area, and it was decided against because it negatively impacted the cyclists who were using Blossom. So in any event, I think there's going to have to be something to focus on the safety of that particular intersection. It's going to be an exposure. So just a comment.
Thanks for that piece of feedback. We definitely want these streets to be as safe and predictable as possible. So we'll take another look at that intersection.
Okay. Now we have a few more in the chat. Will the aforementioned signal, I think that's the one at I-10 feeder, be set to recall at all times, or will there be a detection loop camera installed to detect bicycles?
Okay, that's coming from some nerdy traffic engineer, I can almost guarantee. What recall means, it has to do with the signal timing. We don't do this very often, but if you ever come up to a signal, sometimes you'll have to wait. And this, if you're in a car, usually if you're in a car, we'll have some kind of sensor in the ground to detect that you're there, and then it'll give you the green light. The challenge is that if that's the case and you're on a bike, then the sensors might not work for you and you might never get the green light. So I think it's safe to say we'll have to look at that particular intersection to see what kind of detection it has, if any. If it does need to be set so that it always goes through the cycle to be able to get to a bicycle, I think that's a very good point, and we'll take a look at it.
And odds are Ian knows who that person is. Okay, back to the hands raised. Tom Compson again.
Yes, thank you. Could you just flash back to the slide that shows the timeline on when you're going to build this?
Sure. So our best
Okay.
estimate at this point is summer 2021, but as Ian will be more active in that contract down the line, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, that seems about right. I mean, our design consultants, I think some of whom are here, are working very diligently with us to get the designs wrapped up. At the same time, we are also working internally to make sure that our contractors who actually do the construction are on board. And they were close at the end of last year, and so I think they're either there or on the verge of it. So I think by the time we get ready with the design, the contractors will be on board. So summer seems very reasonable.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Tom.
Back to the chat. Any adjustments being made for the railroad crossing? Maybe something similar to the light at I-10.
So of this entire project, the railroad crossing is probably the piece that we have the least control over. It's currently a relatively narrow paving section, so we can't really add anything to that. Don't believe that there's space for a bike lane or a bike box at that location. Additionally, that's a what's called a quiet zone railroad crossing, which means that there have been some modifications to allow trains to move through there without doing as much horn, without activating the horn as much as they usually do. So we probably can't mess with that intersection much more than the changes that have already been made.
Got it. Hand raised, Mary Chance.
Hi, it's me again. I just wanted y'all to note that the striping for the dedicated bike lane from Heights from I-10 to Washington, just to put it on your radar, that it needs to be repainted. Like it's very worn, hard to see. Cars kind of don't even know it's there. Thanks.
Thank you. And I believe we have some good news in that respect, that bike lane will not only be restriped, but actually have some physical separation added to it with a project that's currently active. Ian, do you know the status of that one, when folks can expect to see that one on the ground?
I think it'll be this year. The TERS is leading that. It's the TERS 5, I think. They're leading that, and I think it's the designs are done, and I think this year is construction. So those will be a lot better.
And for the record, we will note happy clapping sounds. Back in the chat, how do you plan to handle the blind spot when crossing the north side of I-10 feeder at Patterson?
So I presume that the viewer is referring to the westbound feeder road and then on the north side of I-10. Does that person mind either typing in the chat or unmuting to elaborate a bit more on the blind spot?
They've confirmed that no mic, but they've confirmed that's the location. Could you type a little more about the blind spot, please?
I'm thinking it has to do with the fencing around the freeway. But yeah, I would be a little interested to know too exactly. Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
okay. I'm on.
It's a really sharp turn too. I didn't pose the question, but it's a really sharp turn. There could be why it's a hard to see.
And it's hard to see onto the bridge.
Like if you're going up Patterson, like if you're going over the bridge and you're trying to like cross it from, like, so you're on the right side on the bridge going north, then it's a sharp turn for cars. Man, I do go down it almost every day. And it's almost impossible to see around the corner there because there's a big concrete barrier and a fence, and it's very hard for like cars to see you crossing, and that I think that's the big concern there.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a tricky spot. Thanks for raising that. We can take another look. I will say that section of the project, the bridge, the feeder roads, and in the initial lead up to it, is controlled by TxDOT, and this is not a TxDOT project, so we'll need to clear any modifications of that area with them. Whereas basically the rest of the stuff is squarely within our jurisdiction, and we're quite sure that we can implement it.
Okay, we appreciate that. Didn't you say earlier there would be a 4-way stop at Patterson and Blossom? I imagine that would help slow the traffic there.
Yes.
I think we did talk about that previously, and I was just struggling to remember, but I think that we are proposing that there as well, just to be able. And the justification is, I mean, when we do multi-way stops, we do have to follow the METCD, which is our manual and uniform traffic control devices. There's an ability to tie that in with bikeway networks and bikeway safety, and that's what we're doing here to really make it so where we have a person on a bike who has to make to cross lanes of traffic to head in a different direction. We think that's a good use of the multi-way stops, and I think that's going to happen.
There are a couple of more comments about that parcel of land that might be the church. I'm going to let people just read in the chat if they're interested. And as of now, that is the last comment or question I see.
I would like to ask a question to the group, and this could be you can answer in the chat or however. Do you think we have reached everybody, and do you think we have talked with the communities that are impacted, especially North Washington, south of Washington? Are we missing anybody? Because we want to make sure that we're talking with everybody who's impacted by this project, and so we can hear their voices.
Yes.
Claire, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the bar that's going in on Patterson, right south of the just north of I-10, south of the trailhead. There's a couple of houses there, and those people have probably not been heard from. And there's also that Harris County facility with all the vehicles that's on the east side of the street. So I'm wondering what's going on with the bar. I'm wondering what's going on with those two houses there, if they're trying to do like eminent domain and oust them out of there, or what those people have to say about all this stuff that's going on.
Is this a different meeting?
Thanks. That's a good point. We'll take that into consideration.
There's a request if you can flip to the slide with Patterson and Washington again. There's no question, they just people would like to see it. I'm going to read out one comment that we've done a good job and we should start the project soon. And I think you guys have done a great job reaching out to the community. Thank you for those. We do appreciate it. And suggest having people identify if they live in West End or Magnolia Grove, but I'm not sure I'm a little uncomfortable making people say exactly where they are, who they're from. This is a public meeting. Everybody's welcome. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. This is your community meeting.
If you'll raise the hand.
Well, I guess a community meeting, if you would like to identify where you're from, I think that would help. Really, the only reason that I would value that is to know what communities have we impacted through this presentation. And if you're not even from this neighborhood, I think that'd be interesting to know. But we will not force anybody to identify.
Thank you, Ian. This is Karen and Ross Mattern, and we're part of the West End Civic Club. So we very much appreciate your, coming out to our meetings in 2019 and sharing the plans and really listening to the community on the things that we've been looking for. I think, I think we've been heard, and we have had a number of interactions with Peter. He's been great at communicating with the West End Civic Club and keeping us updated on the progress. And so just wanted to provide that feedback. And I know Howard's on and Mari, so from the West End Civic Club. So thank you.
Thanks, appreciate that.
There's a question, can you still turn left onto Washington from Patterson using a vehicle?
That is one of the movements that is restricted by this treatment. It's right turns only for vehicles at this intersection.
And now I see several hands up, and I don't know if that was in response to the question about where people live. So if you were just responding to that, if you could put your hand down, and then I'll go back and call on people who still have questions or comments. Okay, Andrew Munoz.
Yeah, now that you pulled up this intersection again, I did have a question on the south side of Washington. Are you doing any concrete work on the sidewalk there? It's pretty rounded off and kind of narrow, so I didn't know when you put in the crosswalk there if you were gonna kind of just widen it a little bit and make the ramps a little more palpable for the sidewalks.
I'd say we can look at that. I think there's a good justification for that. We'll have to see how much work actually needs to be done, again, because of the funding constraints. But I think it's a reasonable request to look at.
Okay, Melody Velasquez.
Hi, good evening, guys. It's Carlos and Melody Velasquez. We're also from the West End. Actually, just wanted to comment and second what Ross and Karen, that said, I do appreciate you taking the time looking into this. It's been going, was it 2 years now? The sooner we can start, the better. I think my concern was losing the funding, because I know this initially was a lightning project that was looking to be completed within the same year, and obviously it hasn't been able to. So I think there's been enough comment from all the affected people, and my experience, you're never going to please everyone, and you'll never reach everyone. But I think you've reached the critical mass of those that needed to provide their input. So the sooner we can start painting and putting some concrete down on Patterson and Washington, I think the better. Again, appreciate all your work, Peter and Ian.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Oops. Lisa Moranto.
Yeah, just following up on your question about whether we think there's been adequate notification to people. I don't know the fix for this, but just an observation here. I live on Blossom, close to that intersection of Patterson and Blossom, mid-block headed towards Snover. And I found out about this meeting via the Rice Military Civic Group. They posted something to the Magnolia Grove Civic Group. And my immediate neighbors here did not know anything about it as of 10 minutes before the start of the meeting. And I was telling them about it and how I found out about it. So my concern is more so for people who live on these streets where the path will flow, that they really, my sense is that not many people know about this. I don't know the fix for that. Again, I don't think that the Facebook civic groups pages are adequate to inform people. I know that just as an aside, Claire's questions about that Harmonium Historic District, I found out about those meetings, which have already occurred, via the same Facebook civic group websites, Facebook sites. But clearly she didn't know. I know a lot of people didn't know about it. So I don't think the Facebook is the means for communication. I don't know what else to propose, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I really don't think many people know about this proposal, even those who live on the path that's being proposed on those streets.
Thanks for that feedback. We appreciate it. We do want to make sure that we're reaching everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we do have a message in the chat confirming there's no easy way to reach everyone. Earlier this week, this commenter sent an email out to the Magnolia Grove by their mailing list about this meeting. And somebody else commented they found out about it, about the flyer put on their car that the city did. Okay, Barrett Ochoa.
Hello. I noticed from some of the new bikeways, such on Hutchins, where recent median closures have gone in, or even on Cavalcade and the north side. It's on a roadway with continuous median. So I'm trying to remember if this might be the first application of just a median closure kind of by itself. And my question is if the budget allows, or what constraints may be to possibly deter motorists from doing a very quick U-turn and bypassing the discouragement of going through. And my question kind of revolves around if funding exists, or if there's design guidance, or it looks to the west, there's a driveway that you might be trying to preserve left turns out of, but to the east, it seems that there's no curb cuts that would be affected.
I'm going to defer to Ian on that. I'm not sure if there's sort of best practices for how these are designed with a center turn lane to prevent some of those unintended movements.
We'll have to look at it. It's a fair point, and we might be able to extend it a little bit to be able to if you can't, I don't know if we completely want to get rid of all U-turns. I think maybe having the ability to do a safe U-turn might still be desirable, but I think having it too close where people can just zip around again, zip, that's one of my technical terms today, zip around it very quickly is kind of defeating some of the purpose. So I think we can take a look at that and see if we can make any modifications. You know, and some of it is we're trying to use best practice, and this is the first time we're kind of doing some of these things. So we might just have to play it by ear and maybe make further modifications as we try them out.
I see no more hands raised or questions in the chat. We'll give it one more minute, see if anybody has anything. If not, Peter, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you all so much for taking time out of your evening and sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate all of your engagement tonight and all of your participation so far. And a lot of you have been with us from the beginning, so thanks a lot. We will be posting this presentation to our website, like I said, by noon tomorrow. Please feel free to share, and my contact information is also within the presentation. Please bother me first about this, not David and Ian. But if there's a question that I can't answer, I will I'll send it their way. So again, thanks very much and have a good night.